Ellis, and I'm the acting chair of the Alexandria Democratic Committee, the sponsor of this evening's debate. I'd like to acknowledge some people who are special guests who are here tonight, starting with Sheriff Dana Lawhorn. So everybody has to behave really well. Patsy Tucker, former mayor and former senator from Alexandria. David Speck, former councilman from Alexandria. Margot Horner, chair of the 8th District. And we are happy to have some of our candidates for delegate in the 45th District with us tonight also. You won't be hearing from them, but they would stand up. Craig Pfeiffer, Larry Altenberg, Julie Jacopek, Mark Levine, and I don't think I saw Clarence Tong in the audience yet. So, okay. During the first part of the evening, you're going to hear from some of your Democratic candidates for City Council, and your nominee for 46th District delegate, and 2 senators. Senator Evan of the 30th District and Senator Barker of the 39th. Many of you have been asking questions about what's a nominee forum. That's a nominee forum. We wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to hear from those candidates who are not facing a primary challenge in June. Now, following a few minutes from each of these candidates, you will hear from your candidates for mayor of Alexandria in a formal debate. Now, in developing the format for this evening, we wanted to make sure you had a chance to hear equally from each nominee or each candidate. We also wanted to make sure that you had a chance to hear about many issues that face Alexandria, not just the 1 or 2 that make the headlines and that everybody talks about. So what we did a survey. We got well over 100 responses from various community members, and that is what we based this evening's debate on. That's where we got our topics for both your council nominees and the mayoral debates candidates. Now, an evening like this doesn't come together overnight. It takes time. We've been working on it actually since January. And special thanks go to Samantha Pitts-Kiefer. These people, could you just stand up or wave? Samantha Pitts-Kiefer and Michael Cohen, co-debate chairs. Larry Benenson, debate committee. Helen Clark, technology officer, and this is cutting out on me. And this evening's timekeeper, and she's vicious with her iPhone. And right next to her is Matthew Stenstrom, ADC member, and he will be assisting with the stop sign. Jack Powers is somewhere around here. He's hiding over there. He's photographing this for posterity. Mike Maness over there is handling the microphones for everybody, trying to. And last of all, thanks very much to the City of Alexandria school system for allowing us the use of their fine auditorium for this evening. Please give everybody some applause. Now, I'd like to thank all the nominees that are on the stage, as well as the candidates for mayor, whom you will meet a little later in the evening. It's a very busy season, campaigning, and we greatly appreciate taking the time to come to an event like this to meet with the voters so they can all hear what you have to say. Now, with any event, there's rules for primaries, there's rules for elections and absentee voting, which you may do at any time. And there are rules for the audience as well. First of all, would everybody make sure your phones are turned off? If you have a pager, please turn it off. We want to respect our speakers as well as the audience members. So if you have the need to have a conversation, if you would take it out to the lobby, that would be appreciated. Okay. And if you're going to tweet this evening, the hashtag is ADC debate. Now, this evening, our moderator is Mr. George Burke, sitting right here. George has been active in Northern Virginia Democratic politics for more than 3 decades. He has been involved in numerous political campaigns to elect Democrats for office at every level of government. He is the chairman of the Democratic Party of Virginia's 11th Congressional District Committee. He's a member of the State Party Steering Committee and a longtime member of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Mr. Burke currently works in Capitol Hill as a senior staff member for Congressman Jerry Connolly, where he handles communication and media issues and strategy. He had previously worked in Capitol Hill for a decade as communications director and press secretary for 2 members of Congress and 2 congressional committees. In between his visits to Capitol Hill, Mr. Burke served as assistant to the general president of the International Association of Firefighters, where he served as the labor union spokesman. He was involved in responses to numerous issues and disasters, including the Oklahoma City bombing, the September 11th terrorist attacks on the Pentagon and World Trade Center. He retired from the IAFF in 2004. He now lives in Falls Church, and he's here to be our moderator. So take it away, George.
Thank you very much. As I look up on this stage, I see a lot of friends. Let me suggest that Alexandria is blessed to have the caliber of candidates you have running, and the beauty of this crowd is, as long as we elect Democrats, they will all be in office in November. And in a city like Alexandria, a primary process is tantamount to election, as long as the candidates do their work between the primary and the general election. It looks a little bit, as I said, like the Supreme Soviet up there, and I feel like I'm genuflecting in front of you. Our 3 General Assembly candidates have a number of other engagements tonight, so we're going to go to them first. And they are not being rude if they get up and leave, because they do have other things to do, but they wanted to make sure they were here. So without further ado, let me turn the microphone over to our first candidate. Each candidate has been asked to respond to the question, what is your #1 priority for the coming legislative session? And each of them will have 3 minutes to respond. So we are going to start with Adam Evans, State Senator from Virginia's 30th District. The floor is yours, Adam.
Thank you, George, and good evening. We've got a lot of issues to handle next year, with the #1 issue being Medicaid expansion, which we've been working on for several years. Senator Barker is going to discuss that in more detail, but what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about how we know what we're going to do. There are a number of factors that are going to go into that. First, are we going to win the Senate majority? We're working hard to do that, but we need to do that to further the governor's agenda. How many new House Democrats will there be? That'll be helpful to the governor's agenda as well. And will the economy and revenue collection continue to pick up, allowing for us to make the additional needed investments in education and otherwise? And we don't know yet what else the governor will put on his agenda. But regarding these elections, the stakes are very high. The Senate is now divided with 21 Republicans, 19 Democrats. And with the Democratic majority within reach, with your help and with our work as well. A Democratic majority will prevent threats to a woman's right to choose. It'll move towards equality for all Virginians and towards more meaningful investments in higher education, pre-K as well as K through 12. This year, Senator Barker and I worked hard and finally brought some fairness to the tax refund process by seeing that when you get a tax return, you don't just get a plastic debit card if you don't use direct deposit. We had a lot of Virginians who were getting plastic cards that were fraught with fees for using them too often, fees for inquiring too often, fees even for complaining. But next year, and it affected low-income Virginians the most. People were unbanked. But next year we've got more to do. We've got more to do processing PERC kits, physical evidence recovery kits, in the instance of sexual assault. Those evidence kits, we know there are about 2,000 or more right now untested on the shelves of various police agencies across the Commonwealth. I'm continuing to work on asbestos worker protections, and with the help of the Housing Commission I met with last week, I think we're going to move forward. These are people who are doing really dangerous work, not always getting the warnings and the safeguards that they need, and we're going to see they do when they get a license. I'm going to continue to do work towards prison reentry and also towards tax loopholes, to cutting some tax loopholes. I worked this year on online travel companies that deal with Expedia, where you reserve a room and they don't pay the tax that you remit to them. We want to work on that. Additionally, I'll be working, continuing to try and reform marijuana laws, which will be difficult. And lastly, I'll just say it's unlikely that there'll be any significant additional changes to our ethics laws. But thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do as Democrats.
Thank you, Adam. We're now going to move to Senator George Barker. And Senator Barker represents Virginia's 39th Senate District. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, George, and thank all of you for being here. For those of you from other parts of the city, I want to welcome you to the 39th District. That's where you are tonight. So since you're all Democrats, if you all just move into my district, I think we can take care of this election right away here. So you're all welcome and encouraged to move to the 39th District. As Adam said, there are a lot of issues that we deal with, and there's clearly some challenges we have right now. I can tell you the biggest thing that made a difference last year in handling the budget, and the biggest thing that made the difference is related to the outcome of Medicaid expansion and healthcare services to lower income people, was the resignation of a Democratic senator from Southwest Virginia that changed us from a situation where we Democrats had the majority in the Senate to where we were in the minority. It's critical that we have that majority back next year, and that will produce long-term benefits. Clearly, the issue that is most likely to be the dominant issue in the legislature next year is the same issue that was the dominant issue last year, and that is health care services for people who don't have health insurance and do not currently qualify for our Medicaid program. In particular, the Medicaid expansion proposal. The majority of states have already moved to expand their Medicaid program, but Virginia has not. We have had lots of states with Republican governors, several of them with Republican legislators who have moved to do it, and yet even with a Democratic governor pushing very hard, and last year we had a Democratic Senate up until the last minute on the handling of the budget, we've not gotten that done. We need to get that done next year. We can get that done, and if we have the majority in the Senate, I do expect we will get that done. Right now we have over 300,000 Virginians who need medical services, need health care, are below 133% of poverty, and do not meet the qualifications for Medicaid. A lot of people assume that if you're poor, you qualify for Medicaid. That's true if you're below the age of 19. That's true if you're above the age of 64 and you have long-term care needs. That's true if you're totally and permanently disabled. But if you're an adult between 19 and 64 who is not totally and permanently disabled, you don't qualify for Medicaid. We need to change that. Medicaid will be a significant benefit, and study after study has proven it, to those people who do not have health insurance coverage. They already have substantially shorter life expectancy, more illnesses, more health problems, more chronic disease than people who do not. But it's also important because of what it means to our economy. Our economy will be stronger. To our job situation, we will have more jobs providing the care. To the fairness of the people in Virginia who are paying taxes related to the Affordable Care Act, because we are sending $5 million a day and getting very little of that back right now. Finally, it will be valuable to our hospitals and to our healthcare systems. And then to those people who need coverage, who need that service, and who will benefit from Medicaid expansion, that is the dominant issue for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We now now going to move to Delegate Charnel Herring. She represents the House 46th District in the West End. And I would also point out, until recently, she was my chair at the Democratic Party of Virginia. The floor is yours, Charnel.
Thank you, George, so much, and thank you everyone for coming out, and I'd like to thank the ADC for hosting this event this evening. I see so many familiar faces in the audience, and I would like to say welcome to the 46th House District, and it's certainly an honor to share this area with George. Some of you, though, I do not know, and I just want to give you a brief background of my history here in the West End of the city. I moved here 29 years ago with my mother from a homeless shelter. We made Alexandria our home simply because it had affordable housing. At an early age, my mother taught me to be a champion for those who did not have a voice in the halls of power and to do what's right. I benefited from a public education, and I actually went to George Mason University where I studied economics. But before elected office, I served in this city on the Commission for Women, on the Commission for Youth Policy. I was president of the West End Business Association. And it was only in 2009 that I decided to enter the field of politics, and what indeed it is an honor to serve each one of you. You are the most active individuals I have ever seen when it comes to any policy or issue. You are there on the forefront fighting. I fought with you to save the Winkler Botanical Preserve back in 2009 and 2010 when it was facing destruction by a road that would be built through it. You asked my legislative priority. I have to tell you my priority is continuing to do the work of the people of the 46th House District. I do have the pleasure of serving on the Crime Commission and serving on the Courts of Justice Committee. I have been able to champion through legislation and serve as the chief patron to some important bills. On the heels of the Hannah Graham disappearance and unfortunate murder, I introduced legislation to reform our missing person search and rescue so that we have now a different category of a critically missing adult so that we can get resources to a search sooner. I helped crack down on illegal cigarette trafficking. This is an issue that plagues Virginia by increasing penalties for those who violate the law. This organized crime actually has ties to terrorist activity, and it is my mission to continue to work to make our streets safer. And as a member of the Governor's Task Force on Heroin and Prescription Abuse, I've been able to successfully introduce 2 pieces of legislation that would help those who are addicted to prescribed drugs. And I've also worked and fought for raising the minimum wage, equal pay for equal work. Many talk about the value of work, but the real value is being able to bring home enough money to feed your family. And there are too many Virginians, and I know people in our own district who are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. My priority is to get Medicaid expansion done here in Virginia. There are too many who are going without, who are actually scared tonight about what they have, what ailment they have, and what doctor can they go see if they cannot afford it. Those are deeply my issues and my passion, coming from poverty and understanding what it means to be scared and knowing what it means to be able to provide for your family. So I thank you so much for the honor of serving, and I ask for your vote in November.
Thank you, Charnel. Let's give a hand to all of our General Assembly candidates on stage, and I thank you for your time, and if I could ask you to step down, we'll move on. Alexandria, there are 6 seats open for City Council this year, and magically, there are 6 candidates for those seats. That's good news for Democrats in Alexandria. You have 5 incumbents sitting on the stage. They're all good folks. If you don't know them personally, you should reach out to them tonight and make sure you do. I suspect most of you do. They have distinguished themselves, and I presume that you have some understanding how they have distinguished themselves as members of Alexandria's City Council and some of the progressive things that have occurred in this city because of their stewardship. We have one first-time candidate here, Will Bailey. He's a captain with Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Service. He's distinguished himself there. He is well known in the community. He's a longtime resident, came here as a child and has lived here throughout his life. And he has a record of civic involvement. He is now prepared to seek political office here in Alexandria. So without further ado, because we have the exact number of candidates, we have afforded each of them the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes on a topic of their choice. So we're going to go in the order that they are lined up on the stage. So we will start with Will Bailey, and the topic he chose was city tax rates. 3 minutes, you have the floor, Will.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Good evening, everyone. Just a few things about me. My name obviously is Willie Bailey. I have been here in Alexandria most of my life, about 50 years. Retired Army, 21 years. Been a firefighter, as Mr. Burke said, for over 24 years. Started a nonprofit many years ago called Firefighting Friends, where I help thousands of kids every year with the needed supplies to go to school and succeed. And also, a couple of years ago, I was blessed to be honored as a living legend of Alexandria, which I think I'm the youngest one. I don't know what I do now after getting that, but I have a few guiding principles on how I think we should look at city taxes and other revenues. Taxes and the budget need to fully reflect our values and our priorities. I do not apologize for supporting more affordable housing and plain old affordability. So that people who work in a variety of jobs in Alexandria can reside here. This is good for the community and it's good for the environment if more of us live and work in our city. I also believe that our public employees should be fairly compensated, and if they work full-time, they should make enough to live here. I believe in investing in our youth, which means investing in our schools. We should not cut funding to our schools and programs that support our children. It is critical that all children are able to obtain an excellent education. Folks, it's easier to build a strong child than to repair a broken man or woman. Also, it makes sense to keep the recreation centers open longer to keep our youth engaged in productive and positive activities. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. That being said, discretionary spending can be shifted to what we believe is important. There are, of course, fixed expenses, maintenance, and improvement of our infrastructure that should not be cut. At the same time, we need to better assess the true costs of new development so that we're not chasing a quick fix by encouraging development without charging sufficient fees for the cost that development generates, i.e. new schools, transportation, sewer, environmental, and public service impacts. But we also need to understand that without economic growth or policy changes, the city's budget will have to be balanced on raising real estate assessments and increasing real estate tax rate. I know this is hard to digest, but we can not deliver the same services we had 10 years ago on a budget from 10 years ago. Our taxes are our primary source of revenue. We need to explore ways to reduce or rebate taxes for seniors and those with fixed income while still generating enough income to address our priorities. Lastly, there are a lot of tough decisions that will need to be made, and I am ready for the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to our next speaker, Council Member John Chapman. John, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here to listen to these candidates talk about their record and talk about issues that matter to us all. Tonight, I have the opportunity to speak to you about something that I believe is vital to ensuring we maintain a strong and vibrant community and that we ensure to remain competitive in the areas of economic development and education. And that's having available and affordable housing. This issue is personally important to me and one of the major reasons I ran for City Council in 2012. I grew up in the city's public housing in North Old Town. Having that foundation allowed my mom to take care of both me and my sister on her own dollar. As a fourth generation Alexandrian, I have deep roots in the city. I was born here, raised here. Hopefully I'll have a chance to raise my own family here. As a member of council, it's been my pleasure and an honor to fight to preserve and grow the city's affordable housing stock so that we can continue to be a place for opportunity for families. When I spoke to many of you over the last couple of years, you've expressed to me that you want to see a community that has affordable options for teachers, firefighters, police, and as well as our civil servants. That's because we all know that a stronger community is based off of having these people in our community. That way they have an affordable place to live. We also need to realize that creating a climate for affordable housing options to be added and preserved in our housing stock is an investment in our economic development future and will help us ensure that more of our transportation resources are going to move us around the city and not just folks through our city. In order to do this, we must build our relationships with our partners. This first term has allowed me to see where we are as a city and see where we can go. Besides approving an affordable housing plan, I began to have conversations and set the foundation with some of our nonprofits and specifically our faith communities in order to identify the innovative ways that they can create and maintain housing stock as well. We have a huge, tremendous opportunity to increase our affordable housing stock at a number of economic levels with the redevelopment of ARHA, which is Alexandria Redevelopment and Housing Authority, their willingness to come forward and put some of their housing stock up for redevelopment. We need to work with partners such as these to ensure the creation of their stock for the city's most vulnerable residents. We also need to get creative with the development community and push them to exceed their expectations when it comes to housing trust fund donations, but more importantly when it comes to actual units that people can live in, and ensure that developers are doing what's best for this city. Finally, I'll work to develop and hold ourselves accountable to the benchmarks we set in this housing master plan. If reelected, I continue to hope for your support in working towards making Alexandria a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and I apologize, I neglected to note, obviously you made it clear that your topic was affordable housing. We're now going to move to Council Member Tim Levain. He will be speaking about transportation infrastructure, transportation planning, and complete streets. The floor is yours, Tim.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I do transportation for a living, as a lot of you know, so I'm also focused a lot on transportation issues as a member of council. I'm not going to talk about our most important transportation issue, the Potomac Yard Metro Station. I'll leave that to Paul in just a few minutes, but I'm going to talk about some other transportation issues. First, we are busily implementing our transportation master plan. The heart of that plan is the high-capacity transit network in the city. The first leg, the Crystal City Potomac Yard Transitway, Metroway, is underway. It has higher ridership in its first year than projected. Arlington is building and will open later this year an extension to that Metroway. As we get more build out in Potomac Yard, you're going to see higher and higher ridership, and it's really going to feed that Potomac Yard Metro Station. Meanwhile, on the west end, we have Transit Corridor C that's under active planning. That'll run from Van Dorn Metro north through Landmark. We'll hear more about Landmark in a bit. Up through Beauregard, and eventually take people out to Pentagon Metro, and maybe we'll connect one day between the Pentagon and Pentagon City. And then, the third leg is on Duke Street, Transit Corridor B, but there's also a lot of talk recently about Eisenhower Avenue as part of our Eisenhower West plan. Should we think about high-capacity transit on Eisenhower to help induce the kind of development we want and help to tie together the Eisenhower West with the Carlisle area? All of that is helpful to improving our quality of life and helping to get people the option to taking their cars wherever they want to go. On another subject, you'll see a lot of paving projects going on in the city. In the last couple of years, we've increased funding for those street improvements. You can go on the website and see which ones are going to be done next. And when we do those repaving projects is when we do these complete streets improvements, where we repaint the crosswalks, maybe we make them brighter, bike lanes, other improvements so that we can help to share our streets so that pedestrians and bicyclists and transit can share the streets with our cars. On the regional level, I'm the vice chair of the Transportation Planning Board for the National Capital Region. If I am re-elected this November, I'll be the chair next year. And I've already started talking to the staff about some of my priorities. One of them is better incident response on our highways. Half of all traffic congestion is caused by non-recurring incidents, and we're terrible at clearing accidents in this region compared to other regions, and so that's one area that I want to work at. And I also want to make sure that we are pursuing with a little more muscle to encourage projects in this region that help to focus development around our activity centers and our metro stations, because that's the way that we're going to be able to handle a new development without increasing traffic. So I appreciate your being here again, and I'll be happy to talk to you later about any of these issues or any other issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Now we move on to our next candidate, Council Member Del Pepper, and she is going to address the issue of Landmark. The floor is yours, madam.
I chose Landmark Mall because this is the one question I get asked most of the time. What's new with Landmark Mall? Howard Hughes Corporation, which owns the middle section between Sears and Macy's, is going to be, it was scheduled, shall we say, to come to the City Council in June of this year to request a little more density, both for the residential portion and the retail uses that they have there. And I would not be one bit surprised if they also request some kind of city support, given the economic conditions that or climate, I should say. They already have an adopted plan, and they already have the adoption of a phase 1 plan. So they'll be coming in just for the hope for this particular change. Landmark Mall covers some 50 acres plus, and that includes, of course, Sears and Macy's, and it is just too important a site for us not to be really concentrating on it. We need it because of what it can do to stimulate what else goes on in the West End, as well as it is critical for our tax base. So we really have to pay attention to this. It is perfectly sited for location, location, location. It's right there by 395, for heaven's sakes. It's to say nothing of the fact that it already is a transit center, that is to say a bus hub, if you will. And when we have our BRT that's coming down Duke Street, eventually Corridor B, as well as Corridor C, coming down Beauregard to the hub and then down to Van Dorn, it could potentially bring a lot of business to this area if it is done right. I am very hopeful that if we plan carefully, this mall can become a high-performing regional destination mall. And I remember when Potomac Yard was considered a dead issue. It's never going to happen. I remember that very clearly. And now it looks like we are on the verge of having it come to be. So I am hopeful that this is the sort of thing that can happen to Landmark Mall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move to Paul Smedberg, City Council member. He will talk about Potomac Yard, Metro, and economic development. The floor is yours, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Welcome, everyone. On my service on council over the last 7 years, I've had the privilege of serving on the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission and the Virginia Railway Express. The last 3 years, I've actually had the opportunity to chair both those organizations. And I've been able to work with our regional partners on a lot of transit-related projects and key transportation projects, not only to Alexandria, but this region. And I'm reminded every day the importance of building a strong transit infrastructure not only within our city, but within this region. We are about to make an important decision. Either way, are we going to build Potomac Yard Metro Station or aren't we? I believe we should. We have done a lot of work over the last decades, and most importantly, over the last 3 years, to come up with agreements with the National Park Service. This is the first time, it's an historic agreement, that we have a net benefit agreement with the Park Service that looked at a no-build, option A and option B. Option A and option B have been deemed worthy, if you will. And the net benefit assessment basically says that the Park Service and their property will be better off based on a no-build scenario. So we have this agreement. We'll be improving the bike trails. We'll be improving Dangerfield Island, which most people don't know is actually in the city of Alexandria, and many other park and infrastructure improvements. And we will save the George Washington Memorial Parkway. Part of this discussion over the next couple of weeks, we'll have a public hearing on May 16th and a special meeting of council on May 20th to make an ultimate decision. But there is a complex funding agreement in place. We have $69 million approximately from the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, anywhere between 49 and 70 million from a developer contribution, depending on how quick the build out is in North Potomac Yard. We have 2 special task districts. We have tax increment funding. And recently we were awarded a $50 million loan from the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And I was really proud to work with city staff to make sure that that happened. So all of this total will have very little burden on the residents of Alexandria. And because of this, we were able to reduce our debt service from around $30 million a year to about 13. So this is an important decision. We need to be part of the metro system. North Potomac Yard needs to be redeveloped. We need to do it in a good way with sound commercial development so we can better balance the mix between residential and commercial development here. So all the burden and the tax burden is now placed on our residential owners. And thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Paul. Last but not least, we will go to Councilmember Justin Wilson, who will address the topics of Alexandria City Public Schools and long-range planning. The floor is yours, Justin.
Thank you, George, and thanks for all that are here. As George said, my name is Justin Wilson, and I'm proud to serve you on the Alexandria City Council. As a Democratic nominee for re-election, I would be honored to have your vote this November. Every day, my day starts roughly the same way. Somewhere between 7:20 and maybe as late as 7:45, me and my 2 kids head out of our door and we walk down the hill to Mount Vernon Community School, where I leave them for 4th and 1st grade. Every day I'm reminded of the importance of having high-quality schools that prepare our kids for the 21st century economy. I'm brought back to the very first PTA meeting I attended when my son was in kindergarten. The principal at the time was briefing us about the reading test scores. And there was a parent in the back. She raised her hand and she said, "Well, what can I do?" And the principal gave a very personal answer. You can read with your kids. These are the types of books you could read. And the parent put their hand back up and interrupted the principal and said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not worried about my kid. What can I do about all of our kids? She took the very same ownership that we in city government have to take for the quality of our schools. It is not an Alexandria City Public Schools challenge. It is an Alexandria problem. It is an Alexandria challenge. I've been proud to serve on the City Schools Subcommittee and the Long Range Educational Facilities Work Group for these last 2.5 years, working every day to strengthen the ties between our schools and our city to make sure that we ensure the success of every child. I believe the 2 biggest challenges that we face over these next few years in our schools are readiness and capacity. This year, 20% of the children that started in kindergarten in the Alexandria City Public Schools had no preschool experience to speak of. That means most of them started out behind on day 1. That's unacceptable. I was proud to lead this council in making historic new investments to early childhood education restoring the painful federal cuts to Head Start, and expanding the public-private partnership that we do to provide early childhood education in this community. And I believe we need to continue that over the next several years. We've added well over 3,000 kids to our schools over the last several years. That's more than the capacity of T.C. Williams that's been added to the Alexandria City Public Schools. That presents a challenge in so many different ways, whether it is kids eating lunch at a time when we're eating breakfast, or kids learning in environments that aren't fit to be classrooms. On Thursday night, when we adopt our budget, this council is going to make a new significant investment to expanding elementary capacity in the West End with a new Patrick Henry. But that's only the beginning. This next council is going to have to tackle head-on the issue of secondary school capacity, like Hammond, where we sit today, like T.C. Williams, and like George Washington Middle School. It is going to be one of the central focuses of this next council. Our most sacred commitment is to the success of our kids. If I am fortunate enough to earn your vote and be reelected, I will work tirelessly to continue to ensure that every child has an opportunity to succeed in the Alexandria City Public Schools. Thank you.
I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege. My boss and friend, Jerry Conley, as many of you know, went to Congress after 20 years in local government. And if you query him about that, he will tell you that local government is the most important form of government. You know, in Congress, they chase their tails all day. Here, number one, you have to make hard decisions. Number two, you get things done. And number three, you see your constituents every day and they get your ear 20 times a day, 50 times a day, I'm sure. So I applaud all of you for taking on this role. You all have other things in your lives and families and the like. And God knows what you do eats up a tremendous amount of your free time. So I applaud you, and I ask the audience to give one more round of applause, and then I'm going to ask you to get off the stage. Take some seats in the front row.
First thing I want to say is please stick around in just a few minutes after we